Previously the class best, Shirahime, also known as S-Hime because of her S-class performance in school, had cut her hair short. At that moment, Kiminami, a boy with medium-length hair, was sitting at his desk, resting his head on his hand, and reflecting that cutting one's hair wasn't really anything unusual. It was strange, though, as he couldn't help but feel that the classmate now looked like a completely different person. He silently wondered what could have happened to S-Hime, but quickly dismissed it, thinking someone like him didn't deserve an explanation anyway. Another group of students began talking among themselves, expressing to each other with shock that she went too far, and someone wondered if that was really S-Hime. The girl herself was sitting with a calm expression, still drawing attention as someone muttered to themselves that S-Hime lived up to her name, even with short hair. The atmosphere shifted when the classroom door abruptly slid open, and a voice called for everyone to take their seats and announced that class was about to begin. The teacher was shown standing at the lectern and scolding loudly while pointing at Kiminami that he had told him to take off those earrings before. But he already told him he wasn't taking them off. The teacher, frustrated, holds his glasses and says that if he doesn't take them off, he couldn't start the class, and he would be causing trouble for her classmates too, and repeated that the earrings went against the rules. Kiminami then boldly asked why exactly it caused trouble, his expression set and defiant. The teacher, growing more agitated, explained that because she had to stop the class to scold him, the lesson couldn't get started, and insisted that was what caused the trouble. Kiminami shrugged and pointed out that it was she who was not starting the class. He said that if she wanted to begin, she could just go ahead. The teacher, visibly angry, demanded him to repeat, addressing him loudly as Kiminami. With a slightly serious face, he wanted to know why in the first place his earrings bothered the teacher so much. At this, the teacher's face turned full of veins and screamed that he didn't need someone in the class who couldn't respect class rules. If that was the attitude Kiminami was going to take, he could leave the room right now. Kiminami, standing at the door, waved casually, and since he wasn't taking off his earrings, he would leave. The teacher, shocked and angry, shouted after him, calling him an idiot, and whether he was seriously just walking out. The students murmured among themselves, wondering if he was really going to leave, with someone mentioning it was typical Kiminami again. S-Hime thought it would be easier if he just followed the rules. He thought that everyone always says the same thing over and over again. He wondered if they have ever heard the phrase, "to each their own." Suddenly, a girl's footsteps approached rapidly. He reflected that it was absurd how people tried to gang up on him. He thought that he just wanted to be himself, and questioned why they couldn't even try to understand that. Then he heard someone call out, telling him to wait and calling him Kiminami-kun. A girl in a school uniform with short hair and a hair clip was bent over, catching her breath, as if she had been running all the way. She straightened up and with a shy smile, mentioned that she was glad that she caught to him. Kiminami, still in shock, wondered what S-Hime was doing there. Without warning, she reached out and gently grabbed his hand. She then pleaded with the protagonist to stay instead of heading home, saying she would apologize to him. The protagonist thought to himself, "So you too, huh?" and said aloud that she also wanted him to be like everyone else. With a sharp, accusing look, the protagonist asked if S-Hime had really come all that way just to say that. S-Hime smiled nervously, reminding him that she was the class rep. The protagonist had said coldly that he wasn't going back to class, adding that if that was all she had wanted, then he would be leaving. He turned and walked away, his posture tense, while S-Hime stood frozen in place, staring at him with wide, uneasy eyes. As he left, S-Hime had called out to him, asking him to wait. She told him there was one more thing before he went. She asked why he wouldn't take the earring off, commenting that the earrings were really nice. Without turning to face S-Hime, he answered that it was simply because he didn't feel like it. When S-Hime accused her of sarcasm, Kiminami repeated bluntly that it was the truth, turning the conversation about S-Hime's own hair, and said he doesn't have a good opinion of that either. The short-haired girl then turned slightly and touched her neck while blushing, realizing the similar situation, even though she wanted to know if he thinks that she shouldn't have cut her hair. He then added while tugging his ear that the haircut and earring discussion was all the same. No matter what haircut she got, it was her choice, and no one else should care. She should cut her hair simply because she wanted to and be proud of it, walking away in the process, leaving S-Hime, girl, standing in thought. Later, the server brought their entree, announcing the spring vegetable terrine. Curious, the seated girl thanked the server and asked what a terrine was. The server explained that in French, terrine meant container, and in French cuisine, dishes made in molds or containers were called terrines, like pâté. The seated girl, smiling and clapping her hands together, commented that the server was well informed and thanked him. The server, our protagonist, maintaining a slightly serious face, replied modestly that it was nothing. He reminded them that the menu continued and to enjoy their meal. The scene shifted to the outside of the French bistro named Maison, a place where the server worked. Kiminami explained that the bistro was not very popular, but was owned by his father. Although his father was against it, he wished to take over the business someday. At work, he addressed the manager, saying he had finished serving a dish. The manager returned his thanks, reflecting on school and the difference to his private life. A girl dressed in an apron stood with her arms on her hips, her face serious and slightly upset. She called the server Ichigo and said he acted like a proper adult here, adding that he should behave the same way at school. Kiminami looked away, scratching the back of his head, and told her not to bug him. The girl then stood with crossed arms, looking a bit bashful. The server explains that Kaburagi Ichigo was a classmate and also worked in the restaurante. Kaburagi Ichigo then grabbed the server by his collar, her face frustrated. She demanded to know what was wrong with his attitude, saying things had gotten complicated after he left and mentioning that her friends had made comments about trouble. Kiminami, looking defensive and startled with sweat on his face, replied that he hadn't done anything wrong and told her to shut up. He added that besides, they had only said there would be trouble. The girl, keeping her arms crossed and a stern face, replied that girl with short, straight hair wouldn't understand because she didn't have friends at school. He replied that he just doesn't have friends. He just does not want to make any. Kaburagi insisted that she hated pretending like she doesn't know him, Kiminami reacting in confusion and letting out a puzzled breath. Maintaining her stern expression, Kaburagi told the boy to stop being so stubborn and to try to get along with people. Kiminami sighed and said that kind of stuff just doesn't suit him, and he was fine like that. She replied that this was a familiar response and said that whenever he wanted to deny something, he would say he was fine with it and added sharply that he hadn't even tried. At that moment, someone called out to Ichigo, telling her to stop flirting and to take an order. With her face blushing fiercely, Ichigo screamed that she was not flirting. She then stormed off, threatening she would be right back with her body tense in embarrassment. Kiminami, smiling at the sink over making Ichigo mad, calls the manager. Then a man entered, placing his hand gently on his head and reminding him that if he wanted to continue in this business, her relationship with the staff was important. So he shouldn't tease Ichigo too much. Then, switching topics, he said there was a message from the owner. His eyes widened and repeated, "From Dad?" The man relayed the message that the next day there would be a meeting with an important client and the owner wanted him to accompany him. Ichigo turned and shouted in shock, "What?" When he arrived the next day, he saw a sign at the entrance stating that the restaurant was closed for the day. He has changed into formal attire while reflecting on how he hadn't seen his father in months. And suddenly, he reserved the entire restaurant, which made him wonder just how important this client was. At that moment, Ichigo appeared at the doorway, holding it open with one hand. With a concerned and slightly surprised expression, she informed Toui that the client had already arrived and had specifically asked her to call him. When asked what was wrong, the girl blushed and smirked, remarking that he looked like a host club guy. Ichigo asked if he was mocking her, but added, with a deeper blush, that he looked really good. She appeared flustered and embarrassed while making this confession. Kiminami replied that he understood and thinks his father was waiting for him, so he needed to hurry. His expression now resolved. She acknowledges and tells him to do his best. Internally, he reassured himself that no matter what his father said, he would definitely take over the place. That commitment, he told himself, would never change. As he walked away, he repeated in his mind that he would make it a reality. his footsteps firm and deliberate as he exited. The two men were seated at a table waiting for someone. One wore a tie, while the other had short, dark hair. When Kiminami arrived, the man with short hair greeted him warmly, saying he had grown. The older, his father Kiminami Toui, addressed him with a tense face, telling him to sit down quickly. Toui responded with "Dad," his face sweating slightly. He thought that the other man was the client and wondered who he was since the man seemed to know him, but he didn't recognize the man. Kiminami, growing increasingly annoyed, pressed his father for answers, reminding him that he had claimed there was something important to discuss, and had even reserved the entire restaurant for it. He demanded to know what was really going on. The man with short, dark hair, looking troubled, asked Kiminami if he really hadn't told him anything yet. He pointed out that 2 years had already passed since they'd first discussed the matter. The father, sweating nervously, tried to explain that Kiminami was still in his rebellious phase and often said he didn't want anything to do with his father. The man with short, dark hair brusquely cut him off, telling him to just spit it out. Taking a deep breath, Kiminami told his son to listen carefully, signaling the start of a serious conversation. The old man then explained with a stern face that Maison would be closed at the end of the year. This left Kiminami confused. A man had turned to the father, accusing her of not telling Toui-kun anything about it. Kiminami, stunned, thought about what her father had just said and if the restaurant was really going to close. His father replied calmly that there was no need to cling to a rotten place like that. A fist slammed angrily onto the table. Kiminami shouted that the only thing rotten there was his father. The young man, clutching his head and looking frustrated, began to say that Kiminami was seriously something else. With a fiery resolve and angry determination, Kiminami Toui pointed at himself and declared that no matter what, he wouldn't let them shut down Maison. He had already decided that he would take over Maison. His father, now sitting at the table, replied that he had told him long ago that he wasn't a chef and he should just finish university and get a real job. Kiminami yelled back, telling his father to shut up and that he wasn't going to follow the path he wanted. Masato raised his hands and tried to calm them both down, saying that if he suddenly tells his son about shutting down the restaurant he cares about so much, it was natural he would be upset. He then suddenly addressed Kiminami and asked if he had a girlfriend, causing visible confusion. Kiminami Toui then turned to Toui and said that he understood how he was feeling from that conversation just now, but Kiminami was baffled by the sudden change in subject and wondered why Masato was asking that. They were supposed to be discussing Maison that day. Masato calmly replied that was exactly why the question was important. He hesitantly answered that he doesn't have a girlfriend, and Masato smilingly said he was glad to hear that. Kiminami, still confused and somewhat irked, muttered, questioning what the point of that whole conversation even has been. At that moment, Kiminami, Toi's father, noted that she was late, but Masato added that she should be arriving any moment now. Kiminami appeared surprised and tense after yet another surprise, as a girl in nice shoes entered the room and apologized for being late. Then a girl with short light hair and a flower hair clip wearing a revealing dress introduced herself as Shirahime Rira and said, "Nice to meet you." Kiminami wondered in confusion what Shirahime was now doing here. Masato smiled back and told her not to worry, explaining that Toui-kun had simply been confused and they were just clarifying the situation to him. Kiminami Toui, smiling warmly, apologized for taking so long to change into her dress. Masato then formally introduced himself again, saying he was a friend of Kiminami's father and that his name was Shirahime Masato. While he spoke, Shirahime stood close beside him, holding her shoulder, and then he suggested that they discuss Maison's future. With a gentle smile, she addressed Toui, saying she wanted him to marry her daughter Rira. This made Kiminami react with shock, thinking that the once unreachable flower was now going to be his fiancée.